This is the Second Studio, hosted by the Architecture and Design Office fame. My name is David Lee, and with me is Marina Bordero-Ney. The two of us are architects, partners at the office, and of course, hosts of the show. And today it's the two of us in the studio and we're doing a Project Companion episode. And so we're going to answer questions that we've received from clients, prospective clients, email inquiries. And this might be a reoccurring segment. It's a pretty easy way to have something to talk about.
Just have to write them down, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, that is the issue, is that
We don't.
And so I will have to keep track of those more often.
I'm waiting for the AI chip to be able to be put in your brain so it keeps track of all that stuff.
I mean, there's apps and stuff to do that already. We just not using them.
There's too many apps.
Sponsors.
Architects, design leaders, founders redefining the industry. If you want to shape not only buildings but the businesses behind them, this is your moment. Future London Academy's Executive MBA takes you inside the boardrooms of Pentagram, Uber, Zaha Hadid Architects, and Google, where you will master finance, strategy, and operations from the people who already excel at them. Study alongside peers, transforming the industry worldwide, and do it all in just 9 intensive weeks over 1 year between London and California. Award-winning, transformative, crafted for design and architecture leaders with 15 plus years of experience. If you're ready to grow your impact, apply now by tapping the Future London Academy link in our show notes. Spreadsheets can't bring your designs to life, but Programma can. Say hello to a bespoke integrated software suite built by and for experienced architecture and design professionals. Use your Pinterest image library to build collaborative mood boards, then turn them into shared online presentations with a click using Programma's pinboards. Use the Programma Web Clipper to build a centralized specification library for your studio. Share always up-to-date specifications and product schedules with clients, trades, and colleagues by generating beautiful, branded, live links and client dashboards. Programma's clean, minimal interface allows your work to shine. Start for free and save 25% on annual plans at programma.design/Second Studio.
This is the Second Studio with the two of us. Here we go. First question that we get pretty often is whether or not, as I'm the client, whether or not I can phase my project and do it in pieces, and if that's a good idea or a bad idea. Well, first of all, people ask, will you work on a project that is phased?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think if it's phased in a way that makes sense, it's totally doable. And, I think we also understand that, clients and the funds available to start a project, or the life changes that might happen in the next 5-10 years might require the project to evolve as well. So I think it's part of the challenge of projects. So I don't think that's a turn off for us at all. If it's a good idea to phase, it really depends what you mean by phasing and how you're phasing it. Mm-hmm. I think there is a lot of bad ways of phasing a project, and there is a lot of ways that make, again, complete sense.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing we see the most is in terms of phasing, maybe would be an addition be done later on. So let's say a client bought a house and it needs renovation. They would do renovation on the main house, and then maybe later they'll build an ADU, a pool house, a pool, and do that kind of work. And that might not happen right now because, again, they don't have the funds or the energy. They just want to move in and just kind of postpone some of the wish list item to be done at a later time, which I think is totally fair.
Yeah.
That makes sense, right? Because you probably want to move in the house to get an understanding of how you want to live in that new house. And those accessory structures, things happening in the backyard, you might have some ideas, but it might not really be set in stone. Mm. Now, where I think it becomes trickier to sequence the work is when the work on the overlaps between the phases, right? Because it's always kind of the tricky point of sequencing construction or remodel or additions, right? Mm-hmm. Is you do the stuff once, but then you're going to have to come in later, do more work, and you're going to have to redo the stuff that you already paid for in the first time around. Yeah. And there is kind of redundant cost in doing that. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's minor and it makes sense and it's inevitable, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's too much that it's a little bit of a waste. So I think that's the harder split.
Yeah, those are all great points. I like the observation that if it's a new property and a new house, a new living experience, there's value in being in there for a certain period of time before truly knowing what you want out of the final version of that property and house. And yeah, sometimes it's just driven by the fact that, you have bought a property and you just want to get in. You need to leave the other place. You're tired of that other place, or you need more space for your family, or whatever it is. You have to get in there. But the house is in disrepair, so you need to do some amount of work to make it livable and hopefully enjoyable as well. The easiest type of phased projects to do are when the construction work for phase 2 or phase 3 is completely detached.
Yeah.
And there's also accessibility to the site to do that work, right? You're not having to go around weird ways or through really tight outdoor spaces to then build that thing. So phasing is totally doable, but it generally does require more collaborative conversations much earlier on than typical. So in a normal project, obviously anyone who's listened to us, they know that we're big advocates of onboarding as many people as possible early. Not everyone is onboarded on day one, but GC should be onboarded very early. Engineers, in a lot of cases, I'd advocate they should be onboarded early. Get everyone early. In phased projects, that becomes no longer, it's not optional. Like, you really have to do it. So what I was going to say, in a normal project, if the GC is not onboarded, as early as we would like, or the engineer, we've done enough projects. We know roughly how it's going to go. We know from historical data and expertise and experience, okay, we can do this thing. There's a 95% chance it's going to work out this way. I don't need to talk to a GC about it. I've seen it before. Phasing, though, especially when the work is physically overlapped or they're attached to each other, that's a very, very nuanced conversation about, like, beam sizes, foundation sizes. Can you get the equipment you need back here at that moment? How to deal with this juncture? It's like it is a large scale conversation that is driven by detailed conversation and details of practicality of construction methods a lot of times. And so it's just not possible to really figure out the best path for phasing, for when it would happen, or rather the scope of the phases, unless you have typically those 3 players involved, at least.
Yeah, it becomes tricky, especially when you're touching the envelope. I mean, if you're, let's say, okay, you bought a house, remodeling the kitchen and 2 bathrooms, and there is like 2 other bathrooms you don't want to remodel now, you do that in like 5 years when the kids are out of the house and you can actually make it nice, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's fine because the scope is isolated.
Yeah, it's controlled.
But, let's say you want to do an addition on top of your house, but you also want to remodel or build new the first story. Mm-hmm. You have to take into consideration what's going to be going on top of that. And I think in an ideal scenario, you want to design the whole project with all the phases in, mm-hmm. and then just kind of like work backwards to see like what do we need to do now to also make sure that we accommodate for that phase 2 later. Yeah. So I want to talk about that because one of the other sub-questions we get in this topic is how much of the final scope of work needs to be designed in order to work backward and, parse out what's phase 1 and where does it stop before phase 2, begins in terms of scope. And the answer varies depending on the project, but we don't need to fully design phase 2. And especially time is a factor as well, right? If phase 2 is going to happen just a couple years after phase 1 is complete, then there's more reason for us to design it all at once because it's very much known. It's close. If phase 2 is like 5 years down the line or more, then with the way the world works and time goes by and life changes, I actually advocate more often to clients, then let us do like concept design for phase 2, but not go further than that. Because I don't want you paying me to design this whole thing when 5 years from now, you're going to be a different person, depending on their age and when they're having kids and all that other stuff too. What we design now might not make sense for you in 5 years after you've lived in the property and whatever else. So it's this fine line, this balancing act of us designing enough of the entire thing, including phase 2, so that we can do phase 1 with confidence, but not so much to where we're potentially wasting the client's money or our creative effort for something that's not going to eventually, make sense. Yeah. But you need to have that full vision to a degree, because I've had clients on the
other side of it say like, I just want to focus on phase one. I don't really care about phase two. I know as a client, I have an idea of what it is, and that's good enough for me. I'm like, yeah, no, that's not good enough for me though. Like, I don't trust you as a non-professional to understand what you want in phase two well enough for me to not sketch out phase two in some capacity. Which, not to go off on a tangent, which also alludes to the larger idea that most clients come to a new project with ideas of what it's going to be like. Obviously, that could be aesthetic things. It could be about a window brand they like. It could be about program. It could be about the height of the building. It could be about a lot of different things. And truthfully, let's say a client comes to the table with half a dozen things they feel like they've decided on. Maybe one of those 6 things will actually make it into the project in the way that they envision. The other 5, we find out a better way to achieve their actual goal without doing what they had preconceived. Yeah. So there's no way, there's no reality, no project where I would just rely on the client's assumptions about phase 2 without us having done some work. And really what that means is us engaging with them and asking questions and making sure that what they envision does actually truly align with their internal goals. And oftentimes they're slightly different things. So I think, yeah, to your point, it does need to be thought about, because the worst thing you can do is go through this effort of phase 1. And regardless of the scope of phase 1, it's still a construction project. It's a lot of time, money, effort, headache, really. And then realize like, oh, we didn't site plan this right, because now at phase 2, we want to have this thing, but that thing ideally would go here, but we can't put it here now because we did phase 1 a certain way.
I don't think you need to do full CDs, but I do think, you do need to have the overall vision kind of like decided on to make sure you look at things in a way that makes sense. And also because, again, like from like a permitting standpoint, you have certain limits. You don't want to like under limit yourself or over limit yourself if you don't have to. Mm-hmm. So I think doing the due diligence at the beginning to make sure that you've done that homework before you can think about, doing phase 2. I think the thing that clients don't always realize is when you're phasing a project, that means you're going to be doing 2 projects, basically, right? You're going to be doing phase 1, and then a few years later, you're going to be doing phase 2. Mm-hmm. And I think, and it's hard for people to know if they're cut for that or not, if it's the first time they do a project. So I would say you have to be very careful if you decide to phase your project, because if you're able to go through doing it once, that's great. You could probably do it again. Some clients also really struggle in going through projects. Yeah. So you might not ever do phase 2 because you get so tired and overwhelmed and stressed out and whatever else with phase 1 that phase 2 is never going to happen. Yeah. So I think the first question for a client is really to ask themselves, like, why do I need to phase a project? Yeah. Why do I need to phase? Yeah. Do I think I want to go through construction again in like 2, 3, 5 years once phase 1 is completed? Yeah. And what that would look like. Do I have to move out of my house? Can I be working from home when the work happens? How long will the work take to be done? We're talking about 3 months, or we're talking about a whole year of construction. So there is kind of like, and those are valid questions to ask, the architect they're considering of hiring or they've hired, to kind of like understand, like, should I do that? Should I not do that? Yeah. So for some context, the phased approach can apply to very different scales of projects. Mm-hmm. And so like when I was talking, I was visualizing site planning, which obviously is not just an interior remodel thing. That's a new construction site with multiple structures. But so we've done projects that are phased in that way. There's the primary residence and a bunch of accessory structures and pools and landscaping and whatever else. We've done projects where the phasing is, second phase is just a standalone ADU. So not as much as what I just described, but it is a detached structure. We've done ones where the phasing is like, we're doing some, the clients need to move in, so we're doing some amount of work now so they can live there. But the phase 2 is inverted. Phase 2 is actually the main project, and phase 1 is kind of like the temporary one.
and ones that are like a 50-50 split, and where the scope of work bleeding over gets quite tricky to figure out with a GC and engineer. But it's a good point. Like, these projects take a bit of grit to get through them. It's not really for everybody, and it's hard to know, I think, for a first-time client, meaning they've never experienced a project, whether or not they're the type of person that can do it a second time. There's clients that they do it once, they're like, no way, I'm not doing that again. And to be fair, also, I think a lot of times those folks, it's like, well, it's because you did not have the right team. And other folks, though, they go through the process, and they might not also have not had the right team, but they're like, actually, that was kind of, they kind of enjoyed it. I'm like, there's something wrong with you then. They enjoyed it. They're like, this was interesting and a little stressful, but like, I'm excited to do the next one.
I think also there is a misconception about phasing projects where, client thinks that they're going to be saving money.
Oh, no.
I mean, if you have limited funds to do the project, then, you're going to do one phase because that's what you can afford now.
You're going to phase it because that's all you can afford is phase one.
Yeah. But if you think like, I don't know, it would save money to do it into different things, that doesn't work like that. If you think it's going to save time, yes and no. I mean, again, you might be able to move in faster.
True.
But you're going to have a construction crew coming back again for a disturbing period of time, right? Yeah. So, you're not really saving on time either. Then the cost too. I mean, if you can get it all done at once, it will be cheaper because, as we know, construction cost never goes down. So, if you do the work like that phase 2 in 3-5 years, it's going to be 3-5 years plus whatever inflation from today.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it's a difficult thing to wrestle with.
Yeah. If you were to ask any general contractor if how phasing would impact the cost, they will 10 out of 10 times tell you it's going to increase the price of the project. One, because things get more expensive over time. Hopefully, if you're working, the amount of money you make is escalating or increasing at a higher rate than inflation, which is part of the calculation.
I feel like it doesn't really work like that.
Well, that's part of the calculation you have to do as a client. As a client. But the other reason why that more logistically it's more expensive to phase is a part of the construction cost is it's not just material, it's mobilization. It's getting people out there. So when we're doing larger projects that have multiple components or multiple structures, you want to have X trade go out there at one time, do all of the work, and then leave.
You pay them per the day or half day, right?
You don't want them to...
So the more you have for them to do that day on site, the more for your buck you're going to get.
Exactly. So like we're talking about right now, this other project where we might be doing a series of buildings, and we're talking about this, phasing, because we're not going to do all 12 of them or whatever it's going to be at once, like what we're going to do. And the first thing that we were talking about with our kind of in-house GC is like foundations. We got to do all, if we can, it might not work, but if we can, do all the foundations at once, because you don't want that crew to have to come back a separate time for foundations. Again, sometimes it's not possible, but so the mobilization is something that does increase the cost. But again, there's so many other factors that weigh in that might be minor compared to other things.
Actually, something also to think about is, the labor that's building the project, right? I think, depending again on like the scope and like what the phases involve, but you might want to have the same people build that phase 2.
Yeah.
Because of carrying the same detail, because of making sure that the craftsmanship is as good or the same, or, I mean, even in terms of product, like if you do, let's say, a portion of the house now and another portion in 5 years, things would have aged.
Yeah.
The wood would have weathered if you had a wood siding. So it's going to, the look of the new versus the one that was there before. And maybe it's no big deal, just like a couple of years and then it's all, at the same level of finishes. But I think, the level of craftsmanship and the end result and how important it is for it to be built by the same people or not is something to consider. If you, again, just do like a interior remodel of a bathroom or a kitchen, like maybe you could have a different guy do it. That's no big deal. But if you're building an addition to your house, you might want the guy who built the house to do that addition.
Yeah.
You know,
The materials aging is a good one, and that's a tricky one to deal with. Fortunately, if you're talking about wood, all wood ages, and if you let it go long enough, it'll catch up to itself in a way. But it reminds me, as you were speaking, that there is, in all projects for the construction crew and also the design people, like architects, designers, engineers, there's like a built-up, conceptual, like meta knowledge of the project that you get when you get into it. This is for any project, for any profession. Like the starting up takes time, and it's slow to start up because you're trying to get your bearings, get oriented, and learn things. And then once you're in the flow, you're cruising at 80 miles an hour. You're just going, and on a much smaller scale, that's not really for phasing. But when we have projects be put on hold for months, it takes a week or 2 weeks for everyone on the soft cost side, like architects, to get back into, because we don't remember all of the 1,000 details. And even with the email threads, meeting notes, BIM modeling, AI taking notes for us, all these things, the amount of information, like small bits of information, big bits of information that are stored in the human mind for a project is exponentially higher than all that data. And that's the stuff that is buried in the mind. But when months go by, they have to resurface. It takes time to unarchive them.
Yeah,
so there is definitely an efficiency where if the team is able to, once they're started, just go all the way until the end and not have these interruptions of either delays that last for a really long time or phasing. It's a more of an elusive thought, I suppose, but it's a real one. It takes time to start up and then to wind down and start up again and then wind down again. But again, if you got a phase, you got a phase.
Yeah, no, and I think, if phasing is even part of the equation of a project, I think it's very important to discuss it early on. Sometimes you see clients like starting with the whole project, and then I guess things get real, or things like start to get drawn. They're like, oh, maybe we could do that later. Maybe we could do that later. So it kind of comes down to like what do you need now? What is the priority? What is less a priority? Like what could get VE'd? What could get sequenced? Stuff like that. I think those are conversations that are helpful to happen at the very beginning. Yeah,
transparency is the best thing. Mm-hmm. You can't go through these projects as a client and not be transparent with your team. Even, this is a separate issue, but even to the degree of like, how's this project being financed? And I ask clients more, especially with fire rebuilds, it's important for me to know like how tight things truly are. But like, how's this being financed? Because that does for sure shape the flexibility of the project. And all projects have flexibility dictated by the client first and foremost. But the transparency thing reminds me that, I was talking about onboarding everyone early. Like as a client, you have to learn to rely on letting all those people talk and letting them have multiple meetings with each other and with you there. The mistake I see clients make very often for this and also in general is they try to make a determination, in this case is about phasing and the scope of phasing, too soon. And I feel like we and the other professionals are constantly saying like, we got this piece of information. That's cool. Now, if I had to put a number to it, there's like a 70% chance we should phase that way. And very often clients are like, okay, so we're going to do it that way. I'm like, no, that's not what we're saying. That's one piece of information. Let's go get the other 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 12, 20 pieces of information by these different consultants, the half a dozen consultants, and meet as a group and then decide. And then maybe reflect on it and then decide. But rushing to make a decision in the early phases is probably top 3 most common mistake or misstep I see clients make. And I don't know. My theory is that it is human nature to want answers and to not want to be floating in this ambiguous abyss of like, it could be. The it could be is multiplied by like 10 times, right? But that's the space we live in. So recently for me, been working with some folks And it's a mixture of professionals and then people who don't do this for a living, clients, let's say. And the professionals were having these initial meetings, and we're all fairly calm, despite there being a universe of unknowns, because we know they will have to figure it out. We know that we will get there, even if the path to getting there is not clear. But for the people who haven't done this before, they're like, wait, so if we do that, does that mean this? They want to like calc it out now. And I had to tell them, I said, look, this is going to be a series of conversations. And until we have all the information we need, a decision is not going to be rendered. So if you want to walk away from the first couple meetings and tell yourself internally for your own peace of mind that it's going to be that way, you can do that, but just know you're probably going to be wrong. And there's no need to end every meeting with like, okay, then this is what we're going to do. It's too early to decide. We need to figure out the soils. We need to figure out the location of the I don't know, the wetlands, the setbacks, the septic tank, you know, the latest thing with permitting, the cost of this, the cost. There's a bunch of stuff. And so it does take time. And so I would say, you know, for clients, you don't have to enjoy it because it's uncomfortable, but just understand that there's going to be that phase where things are up in the air and you just have to let the professionals take the few weeks or whatever it is to get all a piece of information and then render an actual decision instead of trying to force it for your own, you know, mental comfort.
Yeah, I think that's a good one, like the rush decision. And you're right. I mean, a lot of people are uncomfortable in the unknown, no control. Like I have to wait for other people to let me know like what should be done, type of thing. You know, not everyone can feel comfortable working that way, or like, oh, they're gonna forget. Is it ever gonna get resolved? And the thing is, yeah, it will. And it's just also there is a marching order and like how and when and what gets resolved. And that's also like, you know, common mistake number 2 from clients is to bring up, I don't know, like material selection where we don't even know what the building is going to look like.
Yeah.
You know, like, and you know, it's not their fault. Like they don't know the process and what the order of priority of the things we're going to be looking at. So it's totally understandable.
It's a lot of maybes. We'll see. It depends.
Yeah, which is not super exciting or reassuring to hear. You know, it's like, well, that's not an answer.
Yeah.
Like, well, yeah, you get the answer later. Like you have to wait. That's the game. That's the deal. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it wants to be. We'll find out.
Yeah, I have to say one of my most uncomfortable situations to be in is when it's early in the project, and let's say we're on the site and people just start throwing out ideas, and I'm usually I don't say anything because if I were to speak honestly. Well, if I were to speak honestly and bluntly, I'd probably say none of this matters what all of you are saying. It doesn't matter. It's just noise. What we need to do is gather information, go to our office, reflect, come up with some ideas, and then propose them to you. All this fluff about materials or this window brand or someone talked about, oh, you know, it's flooded, so we have to do this kind of foundation. Like, this is just noise. Like, it's nothing. And by the way, too, not to be demeaning, but a lot of these ideas that are sprinkled, or sometimes they're pitched very heavily, you know, you're talking about one of 70,000 decisions that we have to make as an architect. So what appears to be a important big decision, that's the idea that people put forth, it is not. It's like, yeah, that's one of a bajillion things. We'll see if it's going to be that. We have to let all the other things impact it. But you know, I see that happen often. Again, I'm on a tangent, but with designers or other creative people, whatever, because it's a way for them to sound exciting, confident, as if they know what they're doing, but it's all a facade. It's like, no, if you knew what you were doing, you wouldn't be jumping to conclusions because you know that's not how this works. And I think it's just I also don't care for that because it sets up it's like a false promise. You're spewing all this stuff, and then the client, if they don't know about this process or haven't gone through a project, they're thinking, okay, so it's going to be that. Then you do a 180 later on because it's not that. They're like, wait, what? I thought we talked about that on site.
And to be honest, also they're knowing things like when people start spewing like design ideas on a site meeting or stuff, it's like, well, first of all, it's my job to do that. So I appreciate the brainstorming and you like getting excited about it, but it's my job. Like, I'm not pitching how you should be doing your job. So, first of all, like, know who you're talking to. And also, maybe if you have an idea, pitch it to me first instead of like pitching it to the whole crowd, the whole audience.
Well, the funny thing though is that
a lot of times it's like trying to look good to the eyes of the clients.
Performance.
A little bit of like, who's gonna be the favorite of the class today? Who's gonna get the bonus points? And it's kind of like, that's not what I'm going there for. Like,
this is also ties in my personality maybe, so I'm biased, but in like a classroom setting, who is the one that is the wisest and smartest? It's the kid who listens. It's not the kid who's constantly like spewing out stuff. They're listening. And a big part of being an architect or designing something more specifically is listening. Listening spiritually, literally, listening with your eyes. It's absorbing information and being open to it. And if you're constantly throwing out just stuff, you're not listening. You're throwing out stuff. And I think that's we were talking with someone recently, not an architect, but they work with architects. And they made an interesting remark at the beginning of this relationship with them. They said, I've learned, because I've worked with enough architects now, that you guys, architects in general, you like to have a meeting and go back and reflect, and then you come back with an answer. You don't really do well with like make an answer right now.
No, and the whole like brainstorming collectively. The thing is, what I find annoying is like when the collective brainstorming happens without visual, without drawing, without 3D, and like who knows whatever we're discussing looks like in each of those people's mind as we're all talking.
Yeah.
And it's like
100%.
We could be visualizing completely different things in our heads.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a pointless talk to have. It's like trying to, I don't know, find a solution to a very complex mathematical equation without writing it on the wall.
Yeah.
Like you could only do that if you're a genius. Like you can't otherwise, right?
Yeah.
And therefore it's a waste of time. It's a waste of time.
The tricky thing in those situations is that because there's no visual and there's no evidence as to whether or not what's being discussed is valid or not valid, or there's no evidence, a criteria set, because it's all just words floating up in the concept space, that it becomes easy for anyone to argue that it's good. And suddenly you have all these people saying, oh, it's great. And again, meanwhile, I feel like it's oftentimes the architect is the one that's quiet, thinking like, this is not great, either for reasons that they know, but would take time to express, and they aren't able to carve out the space because everyone keeps just talking and piling on top of each other, or frankly, sometimes it's just intuition based on expertise and experience. Like, nah, something about this is off. And I'm thinking, I don't know exactly what it is, but my spidey sense tells me this is off, and I know for sure if I go back and I look through all the documentation my heart is telling my gut is telling me to go toward, I'd find out why it's not a good idea. And it's tough too, because I don't want to be a downer and shoot down ideas and things, but
just let everyone dream, and then send an email the next day like, oh, by the way, this doesn't work.
But you're talking about solving a math problem and without drawing it. It's like the advanced chess players play chess while driving a car and talking to each other because they know the board so well. And
I can't do that. I'm not a professional chess player.
Well, not to compare ourselves to like Queen's Gambit lady, but it's sort of like that. Like, because we work in a visual medium. That's what we do. We can see it, and other people can't. But how do I
know? And also, we know the project in 2D and 3D very well.
Right.
So we have that map in our head.
Yeah, it becomes very difficult, therefore, as an architect, even if you know the reason why it doesn't work, to express those things, because really what we should be doing is looking at a drawing or a sketch that we've done, or the performa or the estimate, or like there's whatever it is, and we can see it as clear as if it was in front of me, right? Other people can't. So how do you do that when you're in the middle of the site and everyone's pointing and there's like fucking birds flying around and stuff?
You just take notes and then go back to people.
And then shoot them down later.
Yeah, that's
Yeah. And now a quick break to thank the sponsors who support The Second Studio. The Second Studio is brought to you by Chaos. They make award-winning design and visualization tools, and they're really pushing the boundaries with AI. As we all know, AI is shaking up the architecture and design world, and Chaos is taking a responsible approach. Their tools are built to help architects, designers, and visualization specialists work faster and explore more ideas without replacing creativity. Basically, Chaos wants AI to make your imagination stronger and not take over, so you get to design with more freedom, create stunning visuals, and stay in control of your work. If you want to see what that looks like, tap the Chaos link in our show notes.
Okay, here is another question we had. What can I start with before I sign with an architect?
It depends on the architect you're going with. So we act as a project manager and project coordinator of the entire project when we work with our clients, which is to say that, so when I'm working with new clients, I tell them your only responsibility that you have, the only thing you have to do, aside from signing contracts and paying on time and just being a nice person, aside from that stuff, is you just need to be at meetings, review stuff that's sent to you, review stuff in the meetings, and then make a decision based on the information we give you. That's it. You do not need to do anything else. That also means that of the full suite of people that you need to hire, the team of people, the 6 to 10 different entities you need to hire, we will give you all those people. And if you want multiples to have options, we will give you multiples of each, and then you make your selection. If you want to have a conversation with us about the good, bad, and ugly about the 3 options, we can do that as well. So because we have that role, which is more of an administrative role, let's say, clients would be hiring us from the very beginning before anything else. Sometimes even before they have a property selected, right? So your first stop is us, right? Now, if though our services or the services of X architect is not as holistic as ours, and they're just doing architecture, they're doing the site planning, the design, the permit drawing, the CD, the architecture stuff. There's a few things you can do. You always need a survey of the property. You need a zoning analysis, which can be done by the architect. More common these days for complex houses and major cities for an expediter to do it. Not all are good, but some of them are. You will need, depending on the project, a soils report. You will need also, depending if there's like trees and things, some of the trees might need to be inspected. So you might need an arborist involved. There's something else I'm forgetting as well that is escaping me that...
If you had any permit records and title reports and all that kind of like more administrative, record information, it's always helpful to have.
Yep.
Like if you can find the existing drawings at the city, or you bought a house and someone had the CAD file of the previous architect to work on it. Like that's always helpful to have all those documents ready. So whoever you hire, you can give that to them and they have a thing to start with.
Yeah, pulling information. So in the case of fire rebuilds, that's a big thing. Like get all the information you could possibly find on the house beforehand. Or in the case of a fire rebuild, if you think there's a piece of the structure or the pool or whatever that's there that you might reuse for cost reasons or whatever, get it inspected. You can do that before the architect starts doing their architect work. Or like for larger lands, like there's one we're working on now where there's wetlands. It's like, well, someone needs to tell us exactly where the wetlands are, what type of wetlands they are, so we know how far away from them we need to be. So all the stuff I'm listing is not design stuff. It's just like getting the information. Now, on that note, there should be basically zero design thinking by serious design thinking or proposals, ideas put forth by anyone until the architect is onboarded. Because we're the ones to look at all of that stuff, including you, the client, your program, your budget, your goals, you as a person, all those things, and then weave it together into the first solution of several iterations to come. It's a bad idea to do all the stuff we talked about and then let the GC or the civil engineer or the the surveyor be like, oh, you should build here. Like, no, that's not your job. These people, while experts in their fields, they see the project through a keyhole. So I would never really suggest taking seriously, any ideas put forth by these people. And it happens, to our earlier conversation a second, it happens all the time though, right? Or you as a client might start making determinations. But man, the things that dictate what's a good solution versus not, a good design versus not, are so interlaced and nuanced that even if you have all that stuff, you as a client, there's a chance you're probably missing something about it. Here, and here's an example. So survey. Oh, you need a survey. I'll go get a survey. Well, you want to, depending on what you're trying to do, you might need a survey done by a certain quality of surveyor who's going to give you certain information that maybe another one wouldn't. So an easy, dumb example is like, some surveyors who are on a hillside, they do a topographic survey, which is to say they have they tell you the slope of the site, right? Some of them do it with not enough accuracy, and so us as an architect, I'll get a survey, and the client's like, I got a survey done, yay! Here's a survey. I'm like, yeah, well, not good enough. You didn't use the right surveyor. So I always advocate, even though all of those 5 things that I mentioned could be done before an architect is onboarded, always talk to the architects and ideally onboard them, because they have their preferred people and they're preferred for good reasons, and they can point you in the direction of what you need for your project.
Yeah, I mean, it's site survey. It could be even architectural survey. If you're buying an existing structure, you're going to retain or renovate.
True.
You might need exterior elevation, roof plans.
True.
Floor plans. If you're doing just an interior scope, you might not even need to hire anyone. You could just do it with your own iPad. So there's kind of a whole range depending on what you're trying to do.
And on the interior survey thing, though, we've had that before where people are like, okay, this is the scope. This is what I'm doing. I just need a survey for that part. And then I'll have usually my first conversation with them. Let's have a chat about your goals and what you're trying to do. And then for the part of the conversation that's about what they want to do and what they want to get out of it, I'm like, well, the majority of this conversation was not about the scope you described. It's something very different. So if you are seriously considering that, or at all considering this whatever it is, then no, you should not just survey the interiors. You should survey the exteriors too, because if you change that window, we need to know what that elevation looks like for the city. So that's what I'm saying is use us as a resource to help you determine what you need so that you don't waste time and money. Because again, going back to the efficiency thing, right? You don't want to have the surveyor come back out to do it. Or some surveyors will do the full package, others don't. Like, what is the mix? What is the right prescription for you and your situation? And really, you kind of need the composer or the conductor, the architect. You need to talk to them to help you think through it.
We talked briefly about financing in the previous topic. That is also something that, as a client, you should get ready with before you hire the professionals. Sometimes I think clients underestimate how much they're going to have to pay every month for the different consultants they have to hire, and how much fund they have available, and make sure that that's not something that's going to slow down the timeline. Because it can. Mm-hmm. So I feel like usually people are pretty good with that. I think they come to the table, they have a number, hopefully they know what's in their bank account and all that stuff. But I think it's an important thing to remember is that once the project starts, you gotta have those funds available, because that's what's going to keep the project on track as well. For sure. And I think the total project cost it's a slippery one. Because project costs go up, and materials aren't variable. You have to switch to a different material and that kind of stuff. But even before all that, how many people I speak with are like, I just don't know how much it's going to cost. I hear construction costs, which are all over the map, but I have no sense of the full picture. Or they start a project without knowing the full picture. They're like, I don't know. I'm like, then call us. I will happily, if you seem to be a nice person over the phone and you have a realistic budget and you're not crazy, I will happily put together a quick breakdown of preliminary estimated total project cost for you. And again, we do that as an office, but I think any
really good architect who is as holistic and caring as we do, we have data. Like we can help you out. Like so you have at least some idea, but there's too much of this like trying to solve all these questions using Chat GPT, which is behind because it's not the latest information, or Google. Like don't Google search best structural engineer. I mean, don't do that. Like just call us.
You end up with like, I don't know, the weird ones nobody wants to hire. But the how much it's gonna cost, I think, is the first question. One of the first questions that should be asked before clients hire architects. Because I think, like they might have talked to some family friends or GCs and whatever, middle of nowhere town that was going to give them a price. And they're like, okay, so we can do all of that for that price. And then reality check, they talk to, us or someone else. And they're like, oh, wow, this is like twice as much I thought it would cost. So I think that's a very first question to ask in any conversation is that just to make sure that whatever budget you have available is realistic for what you're looking to do. I think there is a lot of misinformation out there, and there is again a wide range of contractors and what you're trying to do and who you're talking to. That the price could go from zero to like millions. So so it's
zero. Oh my!
Well, you get nothing.
yeah.
No, but you know what I mean. Like it's so all over the place. It's kind of nuts. Like there's no standard that standard metrics that people go by. It's just kind of like localities and like real estate market and whatever people feel like charging in those areas and stuff like that. I mean, there is like a range, but there's not like a set chart everybody follows to price the stuff. So it's all over the place. And for a client, it's very hard to understand what those numbers mean, before you even get like a full cost estimate breakdown. Because it's like, you don't really know, like, is that including like door hardware? Like what is the extent of those numbers?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, that's why I think it's the...
Or like even, one of the big one is like the soft cost and the hard cost. Like when you ask for a budget, okay, do people understand that there is a difference between like the construction budget and then like the soft cost, total, like all of the total project budget?
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes they're kind of like, one in the same in people's mind, but in reality, they're not.
No. So I think we've talked about this before. I'm going to give a really, really wide spread because it varies so much depending on factors. But the soft cost of a project is typically between, let's say, 15% at the bare minimum to like 25, maybe even more percent of the project cost is the soft cost. So when someone comes to me and says, I have $2 million to spend on a fire rebuild, I'm like, great. Is that construction or total project cost? And they've been assuming it's construction, and they're like, oh, no, that's the total. I'm like, okay, your construction cost is going to be significantly less than $2 million. Plus, also, you want to layer in, things are now, a new build, probably 10% of a contingency. So, like, what I would say is you might not need to officially onboard an architect from the very beginning, but it's a good idea to talk to them. And frankly, it's the fairest to onboard them if you're going to use them for administrative project coordination, services like we do. And sometimes, I'm happy to give.
And I think, anyone who's, I don't know, any architect who's professional and care about what they do, like, there would be a resource to people even if they don't get the job, just to make sure that people get the right information and head into the right direction. Like withholding that kind of like basic information, it's like, but why? Like, I don't know, you're expecting someone to hire you before they actually understand how things work? Like, that seems like a not cool thing to do. I
mean, look, obviously with what we're doing and the fact that we're even doing these videos is we're very much of the mindset of education, sharing, and making sure people have good information so they can render a good decision. And I will gladly give that away for free because the industry is plagued with too many troublemakers and things are so expensive that I just feel it's the right thing to do in my view. But there is some gatekeeping and I don't understand it. I don't associate like our value. It is very valuable to put people in touch with the right folks for sure. But I'm not of the mindset where I need to gatekeep that because that's so critical to my value. My value is that's one piece of many, many things. And if I can make sure people are going in the right direction, that's a huge win for me. So when I'm talking to new clients, I tell them at the outset, I do BD, so you're not part of these calls. I tell them like, you sound nice. Mean to say like, I don't know if you're nice or not. You sound nice. I think I'd like to work with you. But my first and really only concern right now at the very beginning is making sure you get the information you need. And if you get to work with us, great. It was the right fit, hopefully. If not, then it wasn't meant to be. It's totally fine. Because there are these giant missteps that can take place which will wreck the entire project no matter what else happens, right? If the first step is wrong, it could really ruin everything else. And I'd rather have people go and build cool stuff and be happy with it and contribute good architecture to their world and make that good right step, even if it's not me. So truly, we have work. I don't care if I don't get the project. Make the right step and make the right decisions. Where it gets tricky, though, is that it is sometimes not easy for me to refer and recommend X consultant to a client like that. Because sometimes it does require more nuanced conversation, again, of like, what exactly are you trying to do? When are you doing? What's your budget? Why? All of these things. And then, okay, there's, 5 different surveyors, or soil or whatever it is. I will choose the 2 that make sense for what you're trying to achieve. And it would be irresponsible of me to just choose the one I like the most and just go use that person, because they might not actually be the right fit. And truth be told, if you're a client and you speak to that surveyor, which stick on that example, a good surveyor will probably also ask you the same questions as me. It's like, what is it you're trying to do here? And whereas most clients approach us and all those other professionals and consultants more transactionally, be like, I just want a price. Tell me the price for the thing. They're like, no, there's like 6 different ways I could do this. What is it you're trying to do? Then I'm going to tell you how I price that thing. But it does require a level of engagement, thought, and information that's much higher than most transactional conversations and engagements that I think we're more used to these days.
And I mean, some clients are more like transactional like that, and some others are more interested in understanding things too. So I think it really depends. But, if you're going to bother making phone calls to like 3 or 4 architects to try and decide like who to hire, I think that the type of conversation you have with them is going to be most likely very reflective of the type of services you're going to get from them. Meaning to say, like, if they're short and transactional, well, you're probably not going to get that many drawings, is my guess, to make a big generalization. If you're spending like an hour and a half on the phone with one of them and you're getting into the nitty gritty details and like he or she's taking the time to explain things to you, like, you could probably think that they're going to take good care of you and your project. So I think that's maybe one thing that I don't know if clients really pay much attention to those like initial calls and stuff, but beyond, the formal proposal, the price tag that comes with it, like how good is their work and how much you love what they've done in the past or not, really what you also should care about is the customer service, like the experience that you're going to have working with these people. And those types of conversation are, to me, very telling on how the meetings you're going to have with them for the next year or 2 are going to be.
That's really interesting. So again, as I mentioned, since I'm the one who does a lot of these types of calls, I'm always trying to improve how I do them for the sake of us getting more work, obviously.
Oh, really?
But also for the sake of people walking away with information but not feeling overwhelmed. Obviously, anyone who listens to the show, you guys know I can talk and I can go into details. Yeah. And sometimes that's really good. Now I'm just speaking just openly here. Sometimes it's very good with certain prospective clients who are of the same mindset. Other times, frankly, it's not good because they're not of that wavelength, or it's too much information or whatever. So I really put an effort into trying to understand who I'm speaking with very quickly on a first phone call, to then know, okay, I should go into this amount of detail or not. But due to the complexity of the work and how all the different factors inform each other, it is. I do struggle with that. It's difficult for me because, I probably ask more questions to clients on those first phone calls than they ever would have expected, and it's because I know there's, have you seen that movie? It's a Wonderful Life with the 1930 whatever movie.
I think we watched it together, but
the black and white.
I'm glad you remember that we've watched it together.
Well, so the premise of the movie is that there's this, I forget the actor's name, but anyway, he has a family. He's in a bad way, and I think he contemplates like suicide. And then he's saved by an angel. And then the angel,
because he's dead.
Angel, what's that?
Because he's
dead. Plot twist. Yeah, no.
I want to rewatch that movie.
Anyway, so at some point in the movie, they talk about his name is George, George Bailey, I think. It's like, George, every time you make a decision, you offshoot to a different reality. And in this moment, you made a different decision in this alternate reality. Therefore, you didn't have kids. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. How could I not have kids? Or here you didn't make that decision, so therefore you had this but not that. And what's kind of suggested in the movie is that there's thousands and thousands and thousands of ways that the life can branch off into. And it's that visual is sort of how I visualize a lot of where a project should go. Is just so many ways those dots can veer off into different branches. Anyway, so I think I ask a lot of questions, more questions than people think. And I think, disseminating the information effectively is difficult. When I talk to someone and they're like, yeah, I love process, I love details, I'm like, great. I can tell you everything that you need to know and not have to worry that you're going to be overwhelmed or even off-put, by it. But it is, I've also found, all clients should speak with multiple architects. My internal struggle with
Unless you're in love with us, you don't need to.
My internal, that also works just fine. But my internal struggle with it is that, we're very quick to reply to people. Like, we're fast. I hear that all the time from folks. And so therefore I'm oftentimes like the first person they speak with. I think I'm going to change that because what happens is that I will have that call with them. I explain to them, this is how we work. This is everything how we do it. And I also tell them, like, look, as you're speaking with other people, make sure you're comparing apples to apples because our fee is reflective of all the things that we provide at a certain level. And I would say relative to that scope of work, if it's truly apples to apples, we're very, very competitive, but we're very high compared to other offices who don't provide the level of work that we do or forgetting quality, just the number of services, right? So I let them know, like, look, this is the game. It's all over the place, like you mentioned. Be mindful of that. And I give them a very detailed list of everything that we do from now until you're moving in. I firmly believe that what happens is when they speak to second, third, fourth architect, they ask the architect, okay, do you do X, Y, and Z phases? Architect says yes. And then the client thinks, okay, so they do what Fame does. I'm like, no, that doesn't mean they do what they do. So I think I'm going to intentionally be slower in booking calls and things because there's no.
Well, and then there is like actually reviewing the proposals of each and making sure apples and apples are matching, which who does that? Who has the knowledge and understanding of those types of proposal to read between the lines of actually what is included, what is not included in some instances? So,
yeah. Because the other thing too is that, we're being very transparent. If I'm the third person they speak with, they have questions now. And I can answer those questions all day long. And why it's a good idea, bad idea, why maybe this, maybe that. But when it's the very first call, they don't know anything. So it's on me to divulge all this information. And again, I think they tacitly just associate what I've said with other people. But I know for a fact, like, there's a handful of offices, top tier offices that practice the way we do. And I'm like, I hear the names of some of the other people that they spoke with. I'm like, no, they're not doing what we do. That's ridiculous. I'm like, yeah, that's why they're half the price. Well, and you think you're getting it, but you're going to call me in 5 months, man. Like,
And that's the other, classic client mistake is to, maybe pick an architect and a proposal based on the number and thinking like, okay, well, I have the proposal. Well, this one is obviously too high. This one's too low. These two are close. Well, there is like $30,000 worth of, cost difference between the two. I'm going to go with the one that's cheaper. So I'm going to save 30 grand. The thing is, where are you saving the 30 grand from that proposal? Like, again, stuff is not going to be included. That's what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. That's why there is a difference. Like, price doesn't just jump around like that. Like, things are not being provided. That's why it's cheaper.
Yeah.
And then you're probably better off paying your architect that extra $30,000 to make sure that all of that stuff is taken care of before construction start, and save that 30 grand on the construction in like many different ways possible.
You'll probably save more than that in the end.
So it's like, I think, but again, people don't have the construction cost estimate yet, so they don't know where and how much and what could be saved. They're only looking at the first number they get, which is the architect's proposal, right? Yeah. And that's how they decide. Yeah. But like, I don't know, like there's so many ways like that price difference could come back. It could come back as change order in the project because, all of that stuff was not included in the architect's drawing. Now someone has to figure it out. Now you're going to have to actually pay them that $30,000 for them to do that work that they did not include at the beginning because it needs to be done.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, it's also easy for offices to exclude stuff to appear cheaper, to get hired, like contractors do sometimes, when they exclude stuff and then just tack it on later as change orders.
Yeah, it goes back to your comments about standards, and it's unfortunate there's not like an accurate way to set standards or rankings or whatever. Maybe with AI we'll get there, in 30 years from now when we're all half robot. But I was, to further emphasize the larger point here, I was in the Palisades the other week visiting a job site that wasn't mine. I was there to meet a GC, a very, very reputable GC. And we're meeting at the trailer. And then I said, oh, you guys, can I, mind if we walk around the site and just take a look at what you guys are doing? They're like, yeah, of course. Let's, have a chat, get some air. And so we're walking the site. That project is being designed by a well-known architect, established, been in Los Angeles for their entire career. They're probably late 60s, age, and solid background, a lot of work done, like all the things you would want on paper from an architect, right? And the engineer, same thing, like incredibly well established, one of the top engineers you would think in Los Angeles. I mean, not like top 3, but they're in the top, top echelon. The GC was like, and I'm not going to name names because I know them both, the architect and the engineer. And I trusted them both to a degree. Never worked with them, but trust them just by whatever. I was talking to the GC, and they're like, the project manager of the GC. He's like, I'm the one to coordinate the structure and figure out how the structural details work to work with the architecture. And I was like, oh. I'm like, what are you talking about? But X-Name Architect, they're a good architect. They're not doing structural coordination. And he's like, no, he told me like, no, I don't do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm like, what? This is a person, again, if you're a client, what are the criteria you use to decide if you're going to hire this person or have them go past the first round? How many projects have you done? How old are you? All that kind of stuff. It means fuck all. It doesn't mean anything. I was completely shocked. And then the GC went on a longer list of things that are going on that the architect's not doing. I'm like, and how much are they charging? They're charging more than us, and they're not doing what I think is basic services in my definition. They're not doing the interior architecture. The engineering was vastly over-engineered. The structural engineering, like there's way too much steel that was not needed in the project, costing the client tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars more. And it's crazy.
Like, did no one do structural coordination before you start construction? Like
mental.
Nobody. So you start building and you find errors as you're building. Like...
This is there's a lot of fire rebuilds in the Palisades that have to be done on a very tight budget. This is not one of those. This is a really nice house, very expensive house, west side of LA, ocean views, whole shebang. The money's there. not being coordinated except for this PM who, he has, I think, an architectural background, if I'm not mistaken, but,
Saving the project.
he gets to go to heaven. Like, he's doing all this. That's not his job to do this.
Yeah, he's not paying.
He's not making more money to do that either.
That.
He's burning through nights and weekends to make sure this turns out right. And so there's a moral component. Like, that's not fair. But my point, though, again, is like, if you're talking to an office, or your point, and they gloss over stuff, then are they going to do it? I would don't leave it up to luck or to an assumption, because again, everything on paper would say that this team, high profile architect and engineer, should be delivering the product correctly and doing coordination. Not happening. And the amount of over engineering was so mental. It's like anybody with any sense of structure would be like, you don't need
anyone who looked at the
beams every 12 inches to support. It was crazy. And so this probably actually freaks out clients listening even more. So they're like, well, how do I know who to trust at all? But it's rampant, this kind of these spotty services and the misrepresentation of services to tacit through tacit means. And it's not, I don't know. It's not right. I mean, it's very clear to me, like, what is the work you need to do to ensure the project goes well? It's these things. Obviously, you have to do, it has to get done, and you're not doing it, but you're the architect. That's just, it's not okay. And then on the flip side, too, there are those who lowball things for the reasons you mentioned, and people are like, why are you expensive? I'm like, because we're not expensive.
Because we're actually including the things you're going to need.
Yeah.
We're not hiding anything from the price that we're providing,
Actually, I'm going to start telling people it's because we're not expensive, which is to say, like, you're just way off. Like, something's so far off. Like, something's not right. Because the work that needs to happen in order for a project to take place will be the same no matter who the team is. The work being done well at the right time to ensure it goes smoothly is also the same body of work. If you hire professionals who aren't doing it, then it's going to be a mess. So yeah, I think I'm going to try and be like the last person that they meet with.
But you also don't want to be too late that they already selected someone else.
Yeah, that's the tricky thing. I'm always like, when should I go? I'm like, it's been like a few days. Is that enough time for them to speak with someone else? I don't know.
I mean, it's good, when clients do their research and do talk to different people and not just go with the first person that they found the name of. But I think, you have to be very disciplined and have some sort of like method to actually review them, in a way that makes sense. And I don't know that it's always the case.
No, and even, with what we're saying, it makes sense. It sounds good. But, for a lot of people, they're busy. Do they got time to...
they're busy and they're not available and then they want to move and, they want to get going. So that's that.
I think also, this is not a question, but it's sort of staying on this topic for the last few minutes is, maybe we chat about this on another recording as well, is you had mentioned customer service. And I think that's an interesting topic because it's not something... How do I put this? A lot of architects fancy them the more design oriented offices, who were more of that camp in a way. But a lot of those offices and architects fancy themselves more as artists, and I would agree with that feeling. Mm-hmm. But in a way, or to a degree, such that the idea of customer service is beneath them. And it's, because customer service sounds like you work at a grocery store or something, you're doing a menial task and you're at the whim, of the client. Customer service customer's always right. This kind of the shade, right? The shading of it. But customer service as an architect is so important because of how long these projects last, how complicated it is, how personal it is if it's a house, how much money is at stake, and all these reasons. And architects, especially ones who like they're creative people, but they don't have any like real practical experience, and therefore they have not built up the methods of working, their workflows, the way of coordinating, speaking, and communicating that all feed into customer service quality. If you don't have that as an architect, you don't function as an architect. Being a good creative designer of buildings does not equal architect.
No.
You know, that if you don't have that, then nothing else matters, for sure. But if you don't have the other stuff too, you're not going to get to that point. The project won't happen.
No.
There's a high degree chance that the project literally will not happen if you don't have what I'm going to just call customer service, value that you're bringing to the table, and you just have design chops. It's probably not going to happen. You're going to miss something critical.
I mean, we're always amazed, like, to meet some architects who are just so awkward and socially awkward and mumbles and can't even do like a stupid basic conversation. Like, who would be in that type of customer experience? Like, probably not the majority of people, like, and they still get hired. So,
well, there's an alignment thing for sure, but you also have to think that if the architect you're working or speaking with does not bring that level of professionalism with you as a client, are they able to do that with the other 12, 25 people they have to speak with and work with throughout the project? Probably not.
No.
That's why I'm saying it's not going to happen. The project's not going to happen because they lack experience, so they don't know to ask certain questions, or they aren't aware of certain problems because they never experienced it before. Excuse me. They've never experienced it before, or again, it's like you said, they don't even know how to like just be professional in communication. Like, you can't do a project that lasts 2-3 years without that.
I mean, maybe someone who just kind of like mumbles and doesn't talk much make that initial call easy, and people think that it's going to be an easy process. It's just 3 words and we're done. If they charge hourly, it's not going to be an expensive rate.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It's amazing.
Yes, you could spend hours and hours and hours talking to architects, which would be great. But short of that, I feel like if the people you're speaking with are able to provide clear reasons for why they're saying that, or they're able to go into more detail about it, that counts and that means something. I also think, I'm just thinking about like ways to quickly vet folks. I also think that if you're speaking with an architect and they're making their pitch, or they're describing their process, and they don't say certain things, that also means something. And going back to my earlier point, it's a pretty big mistake for a client to assume that they do that also, because it seems like everyone does that. If they're not saying it and they're not putting attention in the conversation toward that, that's for a reason. And if an architect is saying it, that means something too, for good reasons, as a good thing, and also maybe a bad thing, perhaps. Maybe it's not a right fit.
You get to see really what's included, what's not included once you get their contract, because typically things are, listed. Mm-hmm. But I would hope that most clients read their contracts to understand that. But if you also have never done a project, you don't know what the phases are supposed to be, you don't know what things are supposed to be, how it's supposed to go, how would you know if you need that or not need that? It's like you go to the car mechanics to get your car checked. Like, I don't know. Do I need that? Like, do I need put more oil? Do I need windshield wipers? Like, it never rains in LA. Like, why would I need it? But kind of like,
like terrible.
Do I need a windshield? Like, there's no wind here, No, but you know what I mean? Like, if you don't have, like, there needs to be, and I mean, that's kind of like what we are aiming to do with this podcast and all those episodes. Like, there needs to be like a crash course, for people who are looking to start a project, to know like what's supposed to happen, like what they should be watching for, because otherwise, like, how do you know? I know. But it does take time to learn that, and in all fairness, you shouldn't have to learn that on your own. Like, it should be explicitly said to you, how it should go, what you're provided, what you're not being provided.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah. I agree. I think also it's a struggle sometimes too, because we focus so much on process, and I do in particular, that it can overshadow the more fun, creative design aspects of a project. And again, that the design part, like if that's not there, if design excellence is not there, then nothing else matters. But I guess part of the reason why I focus so much on process, or I'm obsessed with it, because it just, if it's not in place, it mechanically does not work. No matter how good of an idea I have or how cool the design is, it's just not going to happen without the mechanics of the project. And I think that's a big reason why we focus on it. I also think, frankly, from an educational standpoint, the type of architect that is the right pairing for X client, if we are talking just about the design that architect does, that is a more personal taste alignment, especially when it comes to houses. So, ranging from French chateau to like modern to all these other words that don't mean anything, like farmhouse or contemporary or whatever. Like that's a massive thing to figure out. But regardless of the style, the process and the things we talk about, the mechanics of the project have to be there regardless of the style in order for it to work. So it's like my way of helping ensure that a person ends up with the right architect is to make sure they understand the mechanics of things. Because the style part and the personality part will take care of itself naturally, because if I want a French chateau, I'm going to go to an architect who does French chateau. And if I like loud, bombastic people, I'm going to probably vibe with an architect who's that way. I don't need to educate someone about that. But it's all the behind-the-scenes stuff that make a huge difference that I don't think people know about.
I was going to say, one of the questions you should ask potential clients on the phone is like, what kind of person are you? Like, what do you think is your best quality as a person? What do you think is the thing you could be improving on? Mm-hmm. Like to see like how honest and how well they know themselves. Like, how would you, how would you react in terms of crisis? Like, like how open are you in sharing positive or negative emotions about something? Like, kind of like stuff that's more, human behaviors, to see if it actually is a match. Because I think sometimes, you think it's going to work well with a client, and then you discover that actually they're not, the person you thought they were going to be. Yeah. And it's never a good thing to discover when you're halfway through the journey.
There is a...
And to see if it's even worth the conversation about process, because if they are the type who's like hyper managing, don't trust anyone, like always like 2-second conversation, and like that's not like how you roll, then that's not going to work.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's good general advice. I think the interesting thing too, as an architect who enjoys doing different types of designs and concepts for every project, is that there's a little bit of being like a chameleon of sorts, right? Yeah. And that it's role playing is not the right word, but if and this is something I've been contemplating about more. If a client is clearly of a certain personality, the general understood rule, by the way, in terms of the psychology of people, is that everyone, for the most part, likes to be around people who are like them. So they call it, I think mirroring is another way to describe it. Yeah. So if a person is fast talking and is louder, they tend to like being around people in working relationships who are that way also, usually. And so I think it's interesting because that gets into, also, frankly, it's tied into the mechanics of the project, that our job is to be able to effectively communicate with whoever we're working with. The line gets drawn at asshole. Like, I'm not going to work with an asshole. But short of that, if they're this or that personality type, I don't feel that because they're quieter or louder or this or that, that should mean that I am less effective in working with that person. I think it's incumbent on me, who's interested in diversity, to find a way to correspond and communicate with that person on their terms. But that is another that is another conversation. That's another conversation. That's another level to all of this.
Cool. All right, well, I hope our listeners are still awake and didn't fall asleep to this recording.
No, we have other questions. We'll save them for the next one. Give us an outro.
Thank you, everybody, for listening or watching the Second Studio podcast. If you like what we do, please leave us a review, subscribe, share all of our platforms. You can find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Second Studio Pod. We are on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and most of the podcast platform as well. The website is secondstudiopod.com. You can find all the episodes, some transcript, images of our guests that we had on the show. And then we also have the hotline, 213-222-6950. You can send a text message, leave a voicemail. If you have questions, if you're an architect and you have questions that keep coming back from clients, I'll be curious to know what you hear on your side of the country or of the planet. So feel free to share. If there is any guests that you want to see on the show, please reach out as well. Always looking for good people to have a fun conversation with. And otherwise, that's it. More to come.
That's a very full outro.
Yeah, that's how I do it.
I think you covered everything.
I did.
Okay, awesome. Thanks. Talk soon. Bye.
Ciao.